Hello everyone. Tonight we begin with a tale that might change the way you think about temples, shadows, and what really happened inside the ancient kitchens of Angkor. This isn't just another dusty stroll through history. It's a sleepwalk through stone jungles, ghost recipes, and the smell of forgotten fires still clinging to the cracks of thousand-year-old walls. Right now, the Cambodian jungle is sleeping, thick and slow like hot syrup. But you're still awake, wandering through the silent ruins of Angkor, barefoot and blinking, your breath sticking to your teeth like sweet rice. The temples loom, their carved towers stretching into the humid night sky like fingers of a buried god reaching up through time. You might hear nothing but crickets and distant frogs, but if you listen closely, there's something else. The faintest whiff of tamarind smoke, the echo of footsteps dragging across stone, and the soft metallic clink of spoons in an empty pot. Welcome to the walking shadows that cooked in Khmer temples. Yes, temples. Plural. You're not just standing in front of a sacred monument, you're wandering through the remains of a city that once fed 1 million people. A city where cooking wasn't just survival, it was worship. Fire was sacred, and so was fish sauce. Offerings to gods came not in scrolls or sermons, but in soups. But here's the thing. The kitchens are all empty now, silent. Not a single sizzle left, and that, strangely, is where this story begins. Of course, a fair warning. You probably wouldn't have survived any of this. Between the malaria, the monsoon mud, the massive ants with attitudes, and the possibility of accidentally insulting a rice goddess by chewing too loud. Well, your odds were slim, but that's why I'm here to walk for you. Slowly, sleepily, through the sticky dark. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where and when you're listening from. Drop your city and the time in the comments. I love knowing who's drifting through this story with me. Now then, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background for some gentle white noise, and let's begin our journey tonight. You're walking, not fast, you're not in a hurry. No one hurries here, not anymore. Each step sinks slightly into damp earth. Moss curls at the edges of old stone, reaching lazily over forgotten thresholds. Roots split open stairs like time itself tried to claw its way into the temples. And above it all, the sandstone towers of Angkor Wat loom quiet, jagged, and a little too awake for ruins. Your flashlight flickers. Or maybe that's just your brain adjusting to the dark. Because these temples, they were never just temples. Not the way we like to imagine them now. All incense and chanting and bare feet slapping against marble floors. No. These temples were living, breathing, boiling, smoking. People cooked here, every day, for gods, kings, armies, and possibly even ghosts. And they cooked in numbers that make your brain twitch. Imagine a kitchen the size of a parking garage, filled with hundreds of clay stoves. Not one, not 200s. Stone basins for rice washing, angled drains for soup runoff, vast pits for boiling whatever needed to be boiled, including potentially your curiosity. Archaeologists believe some kitchens were capable of preparing up to 7,000 meals a day. So, yeah, if you're picturing some peaceful monk delicately slicing lotus root in silence, you're off by several thousand decibels. These were not your average lunchrooms. They were industrial-scale holy food factories churning out sacred carbs and divine curries. And don't think for a second that this was just for special occasions. The gods in Angkor were hungry, and being hungry makes deities cranky. So, temples equals kitchens. Try to keep up. Now you might be asking, why would they cook inside a temple? Because in Khmer cosmology, food wasn't just nutrition, it was alignment. To eat was to harmonize with the universe. To cook was to participate in cosmic engineering. That pot of rice, it had to be washed, boiled and stirred in just the right directions at just the right times, or the world might spin slightly off kilter. You think I'm exaggerating. I'm not. There's evidence that certain offerings had to be prepared under specific star alignments. Think of it like astrological meal prep. Mercury in retrograde, better not overcook the catfish. Jupiter ascending, add a dash more galangal just to be safe. And if that doesn't convince you how serious they were about food, the kitchens of Angkor were part of the architectural plan. These weren't added later like some medieval food carts stuck outside the castle. No, the builders carved entire wings, corridors and courtyards specifically for cooking. Some of these temples have chimney systems more complex than 19th century European castles. Still not sold? Here's a weird detail for you. Archaeologists have found signs of soot accumulation on the interior ceilings of sacred shrines. You know what that means? Someone was lighting fires, big ones, inside, most likely for cooking. Which brings us to one of the stranger debates in Southeast Asian archaeology. Were some of these temples just very elaborate kitchens? Historians still argue over whether the smoke-blackened towers served as giant ovens, or if the sacred and the saucy just happened to share space due to zoning laws written by divine bureaucrats. You're allowed to be skeptical, but not too skeptical. You're here to fall asleep, not file a peer-reviewed rebuttal. So here's what we know. Angkor was big, unreasonably big. At its peak, it may have housed close to 1 million people. That's more than London or Paris at the same time, and to feed 1 million people, you need 1 million meals a day. Temples as kitchens starts to make a weird kind of sense when you realise how many people needed to eat. Which brings us to the real stars of our story, the ones who walk these shadowy halls, ladles in hand, sweat dripping into sacred stews, the walking shadows. You'll meet them soon. They move slowly, they hum when they work, they leave tiny piles of charred herbs in places no one visits anymore. But for now, you keep walking. Past the cracked stone lions, past the giant Naga balustrades, past the smell of jasmine and old rain. You stop. You smell something. Something cooking. You turn your head, slowly. The air doesn't move, but something else does, just at the edge of sight. A flicker. A shimmer of heat where there should be none. You step forward, cautiously, and the smell intensifies. It's not rot, not mould or moss or jungle musk. No, it's something warmer, heavier. A scent that clings to the back of your throat like a story someone's trying not to tell you. Lemongrass, burnt rice, maybe the edge of old fish sauce fermented just long enough to flirt with death. And that's when you realise you're not the first to walk here tonight. The jungle swallowed Angkor, yes, but it didn't finish chewing, and some things it left simmering. Welcome to the jungle that swallowed empires, and welcome to the bit where the jungle burps, gently, in your face. Angkor didn't fall because it was defeated in battle, not in the traditional sense anyway. Its fall was slow, bloated, full of hubris and humidity. One day the city was the largest urban centre in the pre-industrial world. The next, it just sort of evaporated into the underbrush. But you can still find it if you look, or more accurately, it finds you. Because the thing about ruins like Angkor is, they don't die. They go quiet, they crouch, they wait. And if you wander too deep, you start to hear it breathing again. The roots pull stone apart. The monsoon drips into sacred corners, and vines, those eager historians of the plant world, record everything. They remember which tower cracked first, which basin overflowed, which cook forgot to stir the stew and probably cursed an entire dynasty with underseasoned broth. Historians still debate whether the jungle took Angkor by force or by invitation. Some say the empire collapsed due to environmental stress, droughts or poor water management. Others argue it was war, overextension, political infighting. And then there's the quieter theory, the one no one says out loud. What if the people just left? What if they woke up one morning and said, you know what, we're done cooking for invisible gods and cranky royals, let the vines have it, and they walked away. Which brings us to a strange fact. Despite Angkor's architectural brilliance, Its incredible reservoirs, temples, causeways, and cosmic alignment. There were no walls, no fortifications, no city walls to speak of. 1 million people, and no one thought to build a fence. Maybe they didn't think they needed one. Maybe the jungle was enough. Or maybe they thought the gods would protect them. Spoiler, they didn't. As you walk now, brushing past ferns, you come to the edge of a stone platform. Something wide opens up in front of you. A basin, empty, cracked. Its carved edges long softened by rain and time. This used to be a reservoir. The Khmer called them berets, gigantic man-made lakes designed to harness and control the monsoon's chaos. They weren't just irrigation systems, they were sacred mirrors, reflections of the mythical seas surrounding Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain at the centre of the universe, and also, yes, giant bathtubs for gods. But you're not standing at a holy site anymore. You're staring at what looks like the world's saddest infinity pool. Dry, forgotten, echoing with nothing but insects and maybe one mosquito who really wants to marry you. Still, these berries were what made Angkor possible. They fed the rice fields. The rice fields fed the people. And the people, they fed the temples. Full circle. And then, the rain changed. A long drought in the 14th century followed by brutal monsoons. The reservoirs cracked. The canals clogged. The kitchens ran dry. Fires went out. Rice bowls came back empty. Some researchers even believe the massive stone infrastructure designed to be eternal couldn't adapt to the sudden mood swings of the sky. Imagine that. The gods, once fed daily banquets, getting hangry. And when the gods are hangry, empires fall. You step away from the basin. You feel the old mud between your toes, even though there's no mud here now. Just memory. Dry, crumbling memory. And something else. Movement. You hear it again. Shuffling, but not human. Leaves. Number cloth. The whisper of fabric on stone. A robe. A sash. You're not alone. You turn too fast and of course nothing. But the smell is back. This time it's stronger. Something roasted. Something rich. The kind of smell that makes your mouth water even if you're already full. The kind of smell that means someone's cooking. And you remember, the jungle didn't destroy Angkor. It absorbed it. Like an old friend pulling you in for a long, slow, silent hug that you might never escape. Because here's the truth. Angkor didn't die. It diffused. It leaked into the trees, into the vines, into the dirt and stone, and forgotten spices ground into the floor. And in the quiet, it's still here, simmering, just not for us. You take one last look around the reservoir before you move on. You swear you see footprints barefoot, small, smeared by rain. You blink. Gone. The shadows keep walking, and you, poor thing, you follow them. You follow the scent first, not the shadow. It curls through the air like steam off a bowl of hot broth, gentle at first, then undeniable. A deep umami warmth with something sharp underneath. Ginger. No. Galangal. The one that bites just behind the eyes. And fish sauce, of course. Always fish sauce. The perfume of Southeast Asia. The cologne of kings and kitchen gods. And this is where it starts to feel stranger than it already is. Because temples are supposed to be silent, sacred, sterile even. But this place smells like someone's been making dinner for a century and just stepped outside for more lemongrass. You round the corner, and there it is. The city, not the ruins, the real one, or something like it. A memory burned so deeply into the stone that tonight it plays back for you. Massive galleries stretch in every direction. Stone corridors sweat with the memory of steam. The air is thick with imagined heat. You can almost hear it now, the chop-chop of cleavers, the sizzle of oil in ancient iron pans, the thud of mortar and pestle pounding rhythm into the floor. This isn't worship, it's lunch prep. Welcome to Angkor, the city built to feed the gods. Or rather, the city built to make sure the gods didn't notice how hungry everyone else was. See, here's the uncomfortable truth. These temples weren't built for the people. They were built on the people, literally, sandstone by sandstone, hand by blistered hand. You don't get temples this big without some serious human sacrifice of the unpaid labour variety. And while the kings prayed and the dancers swayed and the priests recited their poetic devotions, someone else was cooking, because the gods demanded food. Not just incense or chants or symbolic offerings. No, but actual food. Rice, fish, meat, fermented mango, coconut stew, banana wrapped in leaves, palm sugar drizzled over everything. Entire menus of ceremonial meals. Archaeologists have uncovered massive hearths embedded directly into the temple complexes, rows of clay stoves, charred patches on otherwise sacred stone, burn marks that tell the real story, the one no royal inscription ever bothered to write down. Imagine cooking for a divine being who could smite you for using the wrong herb. Imagine chopping chilies so violently that even the heavens start to cry. That was daily life here. Sacred sweat, ritualized burns, recipes written in ashen repetition, and here's where it gets a bit twisted. Some scholars argue that Angkor's temples were kitchens, not just attached to kitchens, not just housing kitchens, but actual culinary cathedrals. You walk past a series of niches in the wall, each large enough to hold a wok or a pot. Some still blackened by soot, others hollowed by time and termites. But the arrangement is unmistakable. This was a kitchen, and not just any kitchen. A kitchen engineered into a holy map of the cosmos, each corner representing a cardinal direction, each fire aligned with a celestial node, each meal prepared as if the eater was the centre of the universe, which of course they believed they were. You duck under a low lintel, your breath catching on the cool air. Inside is a large chamber. It smells like iron and dried herbs. The floor is grooved with the paths of thousands of barefoot cooks, pacing between stoves. There's a depression in the middle of the room, possibly once a basin, maybe even a cauldron. Some call it a Srachnang cooking pool. Others argue it was more symbolic, a stand-in for the oceans of the universe. But you can picture it, can't you? A circle of cooks, each facing outward, stirring clockwise in sync with the stars. An orchestra of broth. And above it all stone carvings, not of gods, not of warriors, of kitchen tools, ladles, mortars, spatulas. In one particularly cheeky corner, a fish with two heads, possibly a warning, possibly a joke, possibly both. There's something oddly comforting about it. The divine made domestic, the heavens made hungry. And here's the weird part. The food wasn't just for the gods, not always. Because if you fed the gods well enough, they might share. Offer some of their divine leftovers. Grant a good harvest. Let your village go untouched by drought or war or wild tigers. So cooking was more than just a chore. It was negotiation. Each pot a prayer, each dish a treaty. The best chefs in Angkor weren't just talented, they were diplomats. Which brings us to one of the most bizarre royal titles recorded in temple carvings, Master of the Fragrant Path. Historians argue over what it means. Was it a head chef, a food priest, a holy janitor with good cologne? No one agrees, but the title appears again and again, sometimes alongside military officials, sometimes beside astrologers, always close to power, because in Angkor to control the food was to control the fate of the empire, and as you sit now, yes, sit, because you've stopped walking without realizing it, you feel the weight of that history settle onto your shoulders like steam. Cooking wasn't survival here, it was religion, it was politics, it was prophecy. And the kitchens, they weren't behind the temples, they were the temples. The walking shadows knew this. They carried it in their calloused hands, in their burned fingers, in the salt crystallized behind their ears. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the monsoon wind moves just right across these cracked stones, you can still smell their work, their prayer, their stew. You breathe in slowly, and just like that, you're hungry. You rise again, as if summoned not by voice, not by command, but by the gentle grip of hunger that isn't quite yours. The temple exhales. The ground stays still, but you feel the pulse of it beneath your soles, like a great stomach rumbling under centuries of stone. And as you step forward, something changes. The heat thickens, the smell sharpens. Smoke. Old smoke. You're walking toward the past now, toward one of Angkor's most improbable miracles. A kitchen built around water, not near water, not next to a pond, built into a reservoir. The Khmer called it West Beret. You stand now on its ghostly edges, once a man-made lake 4 times the size of Central Park. Today it's mostly dry, a basin of cracked soil and dust-matted weeds. But back then it was alive, and it cooked. Yes, cooked. Because Khmer engineers weren't just brilliant architects and celestial city planners. They were apparently gourmet plumbers. Here's the weird fact of the day. The hydraulic system that powered Angkor's rice empire, dozens of canals, dikes, moats, and spillways was also used to regulate kitchen heat. Historians still debate how much of this was intentional and how much was divine coincidence. But certain temples show unmistakable signs. Stone ducts channeling water beneath hearths, controlled flows to cool pot bases, even spiral grooves worn into clay where steam condensed and trickled away. It's like discovering your city's subway system also worked as a slow cooker. Water flowed from sacred reservoirs to temple kitchens, not just to drink, but to cook. And in some cases, to cool. The ancient Khmer might have been the first people to practice water-cooled cooking on a city-wide scale. Imagine that. A sous-vide chicken thigh in the year 1120. Stew boiled gently in stone pots, kept just under a rolling simmer by flowing sacred runoff. Not exactly your grandma's slow cooker. And it wasn't just rice. Oh no. Angkor's kitchens were home to a culinary galaxy. Archaeobotanical evidence, yes, that's a real thing, shows traces of turmeric, coriander, betel, ginger, sesame and galangal. Traces of banana, traces of tamarind, traces of so many things that it starts to feel like the jungle was less an enemy and more a pantry with attitude. You imagine one of those kitchens now, low ceilings, stone ovens, open vents like yawning mouths, rows of mortars being pounded in rhythm by cooks chanting under their breath, a slab of sandstone slick with fish oil, a shelf lined with clay jars labelled in a language no one reads anymore, and in the centre, an old woman. She's not royalty, not a priestess, just someone's grandmother. She stirs the pot slowly, deliberately, with a spoon carved from tamarind wood. Around her, fire flickers not from rage but from memory. She doesn't look up when you walk by, because she's not cooking for you. She's cooking for the gods, or maybe for something worse, the priests. See, feeding a king was political, feeding the gods was religious, but feeding the priesthood, that was dangerous. These were not gentle monks sipping tea. These were administrators of the divine, sacred accountants, ceremonial inspectors of holy compliance, and they had opinions about their food. Some demanded their rice be stirred counterclockwise on odd days. Some insisted their soup contain no shadow cast by garlic. One particularly fussy fellow was said to only eat meals prepared by virgins who had never seen the moon. The logistics of that are frankly a nightmare. And still the cooks obliged. Why? Because failure wasn't just a matter of hunger. It was heresy. Some historians speculate that entire kitchens could be punished if an offering meal caused cosmic discomfort. That's Khmer code for you burn the sacred. Stew and now the god of agriculture is mad at us, and gods held grudges. There's a carving faint, almost gone on the wall of Preah Khan. It shows a man being scalded with soup. Some believe it's metaphorical. Others suggest it's a very literal warning to taste before serving. Still, the system worked for a while. Angkor's empire thrived. Its kitchens simmered without pause. Reservoirs flowed. Steam curled up to heaven. Gods were fed. Kings were pleased. But you know what's coming, don't you? No meal lasts forever, and no empire digests change well. Because when the monsoon pattern shifted, when the reservoirs overflowed and then dried, when the canals clogged with silt and the barries began to crack, everything burned. Not with fire, with emptiness. The kind of burn you feel when a kitchen goes quiet. You step out of the corridor and into a courtyard now. Patches of old fire pits dot the stone. You count them without meaning to. 1, 2, 9, 12. Each one once fed 100 mouths, each one cold, except 1. A single ring of scorched stone, still faintly warm. You crouch, you touch it. You pull your hand away. You didn't imagine it. Something cooked here. Recently. But who? You're still crouching when the breeze shifts. The jungle exhales again, long and wet and slow, like it's trying to fog up the corners of your thoughts. The warmth from that single fire ring lingers on your fingertips, and for a moment you forget what century you're in. You stand. Behind you, the vines sway, not like plants, but like curtains that were just brushed aside. You turn. Of course, nothing. But the smell is stronger now. Toasted rice, burnt lemongrass. A sweetness that doesn't belong in the present. Something cooked here. And something is still cooking. Because here's a thing that no one talks about when they gush over Angkor Wat's architecture or its celestial geometry or the heroic kings. The priests were chefs. Yes, the robed, bald, incense-swinging caretakers of the gods. Half of them were glorified kitchen managers. You're standing in what scholars now believe was a culinary sanctum, a space reserved not just for prayer, but for the preparation of divine meals, which, in the Khmer mindset, was the same thing. Some of the temple inscriptions list long inventories of offerings made daily to the gods, and while that sounds poetic, the details are very unpoetic. We're talking 42 bundles of lemongrass, 30 bowls of sticky rice, 27 grilled eels, 4 pigs, 24 jars of fermented fish paste, and 1 very unfortunate turtle. This happened daily, and somewhere in this holy kitchen complex someone had to do the dishes. You're walking again, slowly, past long stone troughs, filled now with dirt and snail shells, but once brimming with wash water. One inscription found nearby actually names a priestly role as he who boils before dawn. Another, charmingly ambiguous, she of the charred, hands. It seems holiness in Angkor required calluses. There's even a theory that the hierarchy of the temple kitchens paralleled the divine order itself. The higher the rank, the closer your food went to the gods. Lower acolytes handled prep. Mid-tier priests stirred and simmered. Only the most trusted maybe once in a generation were allowed to salt the divine dishes. Imagine that. Centuries of spiritual apprenticeship to earn the right to season a curry. You pause at a doorway. It's low and narrow, and you have to crouch to enter. The air inside is stale, but there on the wall someone carved a spoon. Not a sword, not a god, not a lotus, a spoon, and next to it a line of ancient Khmer script that scholars still argue over. Some say it reads, "She who fed the stars." Others insist it says, "Do not forget the fire." A few believe it means both. But here's what makes this really weird. Next to the spoon is a faded outline, a handprint, small, probably from a young cook or priest. It's smeared, like they pressed it into the wall while it was still wet, then slid down in exhaustion, or maybe prayer, or maybe both. That hand was real. That spoon was used. That fire burned. This isn't just archaeology. This is a kitchen that remembers. And you begin to realize something a little chilling, a little holy, and a little ridiculous. These temples weren't just houses of gods. They were pressure cookers of belief. Because in Angkor, religion wasn't about scripture. It was about repetition. Feed the god, feed the king, feed the city, every single day. Miss one. The sky falls. And when drought came, when the great canals ran dry and the monsoons refused to arrive on time, what do you think happened to the meals? They burned, and the priests panicked, and the gods went hungry. Some historians argue that the fall of Angkor began in the kitchens, that one day too many fires went cold, too many bowls returned empty, too many gods unfed, and just like that, the divine forgot to protect the city. You turn now into a different corridor. This one is narrower, more worn. The floor dips in the middle. Your feet slip slightly on the moss-slick stone. This was a pantry once. You can tell by the notches in the wall where clay jars used to sit. By the faint residue of oil and spices still clinging to the cracks. You press your hand to one, absent-mindedly. It's warm. You pull away. Behind you, a footstep. Not yours. You freeze. You wait. You listen. Nothing. The silence swells again, bloated with humidity. But the air has changed. A little more smoke, a little more salt, a little more memory. You're walking now, because what else can you do? And you begin to see them. Not clearly, never clearly. Just movement at the edge of your vision. Shadows bending around corners too fast. Light flickering where there's no fire. The walking shadows. Not ghosts exactly. Not people. Spirits. Cooks. Still moving. Still cooking. Still trying. Maybe they don't know the empire fell. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're just trying to finish the last meal before the end. And maybe you're not here to watch. Maybe you're here to help. You don't want to help. That's the honest part. You didn't come here to cook. You didn't sign up for ghost kitchen duty in the middle of a crumbling jungle temple that smells like roasted fish and cosmic expectations. And yet, you reach for something. It's not there. Not really. But your hand closes around the idea of a ladle, and for just a moment it's heavy in your palm. Made of bronze, maybe. Or bone. Hard to tell with dreams. Because that's what this is, right? A dream? The kind where the air tastes like smoke and memory. The kind where kitchens appear in sacred spaces and fire never quite dies. You follow the shadow ahead. It doesn't speak. Just drifts, like incense. You follow it through a colonnade of half-eaten pillars, each one decorated with the faint outlines of what could be flames, or vines, or both. And then you reach it, the mortar. It's the size of a bathtub, blackened with use, smooth as riverstone. The pestle beside it is cracked, worn to a crescent from years, centuries of pounding. This was where diplomacy happened. Not at royal councils, not in the king's chambers. Here, mortar and pestle diplomacy. Forget treaties, forget armies. In Angkor, if you wanted peace, you started with turmeric and salt. There's a story, not quite myth, not quite fact, about a war that almost wasn't. 2 provinces on the verge of bloodshed, armies lined up, tensions high, and then someone served dinner. Just that. A feast in a field, spiced catfish stew, tamarind broth, sticky rice shaped into birds. One king took a bite, closed his eyes, put down his sword. No one fought. Some scholars call it a coincidence. Others say the stew was drugged. But you know better. You know the real reason Angkor didn't burn that night. The flavours were divine. This wasn't rare. In fact, food as diplomacy was commonplace. There are temple records scratched into sandstone, with a hand that clearly had better things to do. That lists ceremonial banquets used for alliance building. Roasted meats, offerings of fruit, grilled coconut wrapped in banana leaves, deals sealed not with ink, but with grease. And yes, arguments too. One inscription near the eastern gate of Angkor Thom details a culinary offence, a dish served too cold to a visiting dignitary. The next day, his army burned the rice paddies. So, yes. Mortar and pestle diplomacy worked until it didn't. You kneel beside the massive mortar. In its bowl lies a faint, smear-dark, oily, sharp-scented even now. Galangal. You'd bet your life on it. You smell your fingers. You haven't touched anything, but the scent is there, faint, burned in. Like the recipe itself decided to borrow your skin. You look up. The shadow has paused, waiting for you. You follow again, passing walls etched with carvings, more spoons, more pots, a surprisingly aggressive-looking chili pepper, and then you pass what might be a mural. It's nearly gone, eroded by time and weather, but the shape is there. A woman with smoke curling from her hands, her eyes closed in concentration. She's not holding a blade, not a scepter, she's holding a pestle. The caption beneath her, translated, roughly reads, "She who softened kings." You stare at it for a long time, because this is the kind of history that doesn't make it into textbooks. This is the quiet history, the boiling behind the curtain history, the history that smells like char and garlic and burned fingers, and it's not gone, not really, because it's here, still, in the cracks of stone, in the breeze, in the way the jungle doesn't quite reclaim the kitchens, in the footsteps that don't echo when you follow, and in the taste that lingers when you haven't eaten. The scholars still argue, of course. They debate whether the kitchens really doubled as diplomatic halls, whether a stew could stop a war, whether the mortar you touched was ceremonial or just very large. They write papers about thermal residue, spatial alignment, grain carbonization levels, but none of them have walked where you're walking. None of them have followed shadows into the ruins. None of them have stood in the place where food and fate once stirred in the same pot. And none of them smell like galangal right now. You do. And when you finally pass into the next chamber, you hear it. Not footsteps, not whispers. Pounding, rhythmic, steady, familiar. The pestle is still at work, somewhere, even if no one's holding it. The pounding grows louder, not deafening but deliberate, like someone's heart trying to keep rhythm after too much heat, too many memories, and not enough salt. You follow it, because you're past the point of wondering whether this is a good idea. You gave that up somewhere around the third phantom spoon carving. The room you enter is long and rectangular, with soot stains crawling up the walls like forgotten vines. Cracks web through the ceiling. You step over a pile of collapsed bricks, and that's when you see it. The grain pits. 3 of them, carved directly into the stone floor, each deep enough to drown in. They're empty now, of course, just shadows and wind, but once they held the lifeblood of Angkor. Rice, not gold, not spices, not rubies or silk or even religion. Number. The Khmer Empire ran on rice the way modern cities run on caffeine and bad decisions. Without it, the whole sacred engine would have seized up temples and all. And it wasn't just food, it was currency, it was calendar, it was sacrifice. Some days it was probably emotional support. Rice was planted, harvested, taxed, distributed, offered, polished, blessed, cooked, burned, dumped, and counted relentlessly. And this room, this was the counting room. You crouch by one of the pits and run your hand along the inner lip, smoothed, polished, worn down by years of scraping bowls and baskets. The edges are scarred with the little cuts where the scales once sat. You look up. On the far wall, someone chiselled a diagram, crude but legible, a rice plant next to a bowl, next to a crown, a literal food chain. Because Angkor was a rice machine disguised as a religious utopia. The gods needed food. The kings needed the gods. The people needed to believe that feeding both would keep the monsoons coming and the rice flowing. But rice has a sense of irony. It grows best in water, and Angkor had water. Too much of it, then too little, then all at once, none. That's where the trouble began. The great canal silted up. The reservoirs cracked. Some years the rice spoiled in the field. Some years it never sprouted at all. The empire built to feed itself suddenly found its kitchen empty. And here's the strange, poetic tragedy. For a civilization that lived and died by food, its collapse wasn't marked by war or fire. It was marked by silence. No shouting, No rebellion, just kitchens that didn't wake up. The pounding you hear now, it's not real. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's the echo of a kitchen that refused to stop. A final rebellion in pestle rhythm. You rise slowly and continue forward, stepping past half-buried grinding stones and cracked pottery. In the next chamber, something catches your eye. A row of flat stones with concentric grooves, like little sunbursts carved into their surface. These were the polishing stations where rice was finished, buffed, purified. Where its husk was removed not just for digestion, but for offering. Because gods didn't eat brown rice, apparently. There's a darker stain nearby, a patch where the stone discolours in a perfect round pattern. Some say this is where the first burnt pot was set down, an accident that was treated like an omen. The cook, they say, vanished the next morning, not fired, not punished, just gone. And from that day on, every priest-cook was required to whisper an apology before placing the pot on the fire. You try it. Sorry, you say aloud, your voice swallowed immediately by the walls. Nothing answers, and yet the pounding stops, just for a second, then resumes. You follow again. Down a narrow hall flanked with storage alcoves, the jars are gone now, looted, broken, or swallowed by time, but you can still smell them. Brine. Earth. Something fermented so long ago it passed into myth. These weren't just food stores. These were flavour vaults. Pickled mangoes for offerings. Preserved fish paste for winter prayers. Tamarind pods aged under priest supervision. One inscription even mentions a fruit so sour it was banned during eclipses. You keep walking. The hallway turns sharply, and suddenly the space opens up into a wide courtyard, moonlight pooling over broken flagstones like spilled coconut milk. And there, across the courtyard, is the stone table. It's massive, cracked in places, covered in moss. This was where the rations were, portioned. For temple workers, for soldiers, for the royal kitchen, for the gods. And there's a rule carved on the underside found by accident, upside down, invisible unless you crawled beneath the table, which one unfortunate intern apparently did in 1997. It reads, "He who takes more than his portion steals from the stars." The implication, the gods monitored leftovers, which explains a lot about why no one dared complain about the texture of the sacred porridge. You circle the table slowly. You can almost see them again, the cooks, the servers, the priests overseeing the weighing of holy meals. The rice scooped in careful, symmetrical mounds. The fish split and seasoned in ritual patterns. No dish too rich, no bowl too full. Balance was everything. The city, the kitchen, the cosmos, all built on the same logic. Measure, stir, offer, repeat. But repetition is fragile, and when it breaks, empires starve. You place your hand on the table. It's cold now, but deep in the stone, something hums. The pounding has stopped. You're alone, but not empty. You've remembered something the city forgot in its final days. The recipe was never just food. It was ritual, rhythm, trust. It was the promise that if you fed the world might feed you back. You step back from the table, slow and quiet, as if it might still be listening. There's a tremor in your breath, a rice grain tightness behind your chest that has nothing to do with fear. It's reverence, or maybe just indigestion, ancestral addition. You turn, ready to move on, but not before whispering, "Thank you." You don't know why you say it, but you do, and the moss doesn't laugh. The shadows don't shift. The silence accepts it. You pass under a cracked archway, and the world narrows again. The walls are closer here, heavy with lichen and smoke stains older than your family tree. The floor is uneven. Your foot bumps something. You look down. It's not a stone. It's a potsherd thin, curved, still oily to the touch. You've entered the place archaeologists call Zone 17. The official term is Temple Kitchen Quadrant Northwestern Sector. But the locals who still whisper about this place, they have another name, ghost recipes. You've come to the part of Angkor that no one meant to preserve, but which survived anyway. Here's what we know. This section of the temple complex is full of food waste. Burnt rice, charred animal bones, fish scales so thin they've fused into stone, broken pots, broken bowls, even the faint black crust of fermented paste that leaked out and fossilized against the floor. In any normal building this would be trash, but in Angkor even trash told stories. Because it turns out the cooks weren't just feeding the gods, they were recording, not with ink, not with stone tablets, but with flavour. Each pot left behind wasn't just a tool, it was a draft, a revision, a version of a dish that someone tried, altered, ruined, perfected, or burned beyond salvation. And the fragments you step over now, those are footnotes. The archaeology here gets weird. For example, in one chamber, scientists discovered a layer of carbonized rice grains perfectly leveled, as if someone spilled an offering tray, then decided to just leave it. On top of that, a second layer of rice, this time burned, which means someone made the same dish again in the exact same spot. Some think it was practice, others think it was penance. Some believe the first batch was made for the gods, and the second for their forgiveness. You pause in one of the alcoves. The air feels thicker here, like it's been holding its breath for a long time. On the wall is a crude carving not elegant like the bas-reliefs of Vishnu or the Apsara dancers, but scratchy and impatient. It shows a bowl, just a simple clay bowl, and beside it, 2 lines, etched quickly. One point into the bowl, the other points out. Some interpret this as a recipe, others think it's a warning. The text beneath, barely legible, says, "He who forgets the way out becomes the soup." Now, that could be metaphor, or it could be why people no longer cook in temples. There's another legend, whispered in some villages near the ruins, about a woman who came to this quadrant to gather herbs for a festival. She stepped into one of these old kitchens just for a moment. She never came out. But sometimes, when the wind shifts, the smell of her stew still drifts from the walls. You stop walking. There it is again. That smell. Sweet, spiced, slightly burnt. Something's cooking. Still. You step into the next chamber and freeze. On the floor, 5 small clay bowls, arranged in a circle. Nothing in them but soot and memory. But around them, drawn in ash, is a spiral. A recipe spiral. This isn't superstition, it's documented. Some Khmer kitchens use symbolic spirals to map flavour development. You added ingredients not by time, but by position. Coriander at the outer ring, tamarind closer in, chili dead centre. Cookers didn't read clocks, they read geometry. There's a theory wild, unprovable, delicious that Angkor's chefs used this system to align their dishes with planetary motion. Think about that. A dinner based on the orbit of Mars, a soup whose sourness matched the moon phase. And here's the kicker. Some researchers believe these recipes were never meant to be eaten. They were meant to be felt. The act of cooking itself was the offering. The dish, once complete, was discarded or left for the jungle. You look at the 5 bowls. You resist the urge to complete the spiral, but your fingers twitch, because you understand now. These aren't ghost recipes. They're unfinished sentences, and someone is waiting for you to finish them. Not the gods, not the priests. Just the shadows. Still walking, still cooking, still hoping someone will remember the way it tasted. You don't touch the bowls. You want to. Of course you do. The spiral's almost complete. Just one more mark and the ritual simmers shut like a lidded pot. But something in your gut whispers, don't stir what's already cooking. You leave them behind even as the smell tugs at you. Something citrus, maybe kaffir lime, maybe something older. The kind of scent that doesn't just hit your nose, it reminds your bones of something they've never known. You step through another doorway, and suddenly, silence. Real silence. Not jungle quiet, not the hush of old temples, but a deep, airless stillness that makes your ears ring. This room is empty. No bowls, no spoons, no carvings, just soot stains on the walls and an overwhelming absence. This is where the kitchen stopped. The very spot. You can feel it. The echoes cut off here. The footsteps fade. The fire died in this room and never came back. There's a long, low platform running along one wall, firestone blackened. Once this was the beating heart of Angkor's sacred cooking network, a place where 10, maybe 20 pots simmered side by side, flames licking the sides like ritual fingers. Now it's cold. And that's what hits you hardest. Not ghosts, not gods, not even the creeping sense of cosmic indigestion. Just cold. Because this is what happens when a kitchen dies. It doesn't vanish. It shuts down. One morning, maybe during the dry season, maybe after too many years of thin harvests, the cooks didn't come back. The priests stood in doorways waiting. The fish didn't arrive. The pot stayed dry. And the smoke didn't rise. Angkor was built on routine, stirred into being by repetition, by hands that moved in the same pattern every day for centuries, and when those hands stopped, so did the city. You walk the edge of the platform, careful not to break the dust that settle like powdered thyme, and you begin to notice. It's not just a kitchen, it's a map. The stove placements, aligned with the cardinal directions, the fire pits, mirroring the ancient Hindu concept of the 5 elements, the basin in the centre, dead ringer for Mount Meru, cosmic navel of the universe. They weren't just cooking food here, they were cooking cosmology. Every stir was a ritual, every flame a star, every meal a microcosm. The gods didn't just want dinner, they wanted order. And that's where things get complicated, because when the food stopped, the order collapsed. The stars didn't realign, the people moved on, and the temples, they stayed behind, still waiting. Some historians believe this kitchen, this very one, was abandoned last. The final fire, the last ladle. And what did they make? That's the great mystery. There's no recipe carved here, no final inscription, just a line scratched hastily into the stone beneath the central basin. Too much salt. Start again. That's it. The last recorded instruction in one of the greatest culinary systems the world has never heard of. Too much salt. Start again. Was it a joke? A curse? A lament? Or just an honest note from a tired cook at the end of an empire? You stand in the centre now, where the basin once held broth, or ash, or the last bit of steam from a meal meant for a god who had already stopped listening, and you breathe in nothing. Not even the ghost of a spice, but something tells you the flavour's still here, just not for your tongue. You're not supposed to taste it, you're supposed to remember it and pass it on. Because the lesson wasn't in the dish, it was in the stirring, in the devotion, in the fact that someone came here every morning for decades, maybe centuries, hands blistered, eyes bleary, rice still under their nails, and cooked for something bigger than themselves. Even when the rains failed, even when the gods grew silent, even when no one said thank you, they cooked. And when they couldn't anymore, Angkor cracked. Because the city didn't fall in battle, it fell in the kitchen. You remained standing in the silence, long enough for the dust to get curious again, long enough for your breath to feel foreign in your throat. There's a kind of grief here, not yours, not even human. Something structural, architectural. Like the walls themselves are mourning the end of the routine, because that's the part no one ever puts on the postcards. Angkor was a city addicted to rhythm, meal by meal, fire by fire, and this was the skipped heartbeat that broke it. You leave the dead kitchen, stepping back into the corridors. The air feels lighter out here, less burdened, but only just. You're moving downhill now, past columns that lean like old shoulders, past doorways that lead into nothing but collapsed stone. And then you see it wide, rectangular, shallow, a moat, dry now, but unmistakable. You stand at the edge and look down into what was once the circulatory system of the empire. A waterway that didn't just defend the city, it fed it. Because here's where things get spicy. Literally. The moat wasn't just a defensive barrier or a sacred symbol of the cosmic ocean. It was part of Angkor's cooking infrastructure. You heard that right. There's compelling evidence, and by compelling we mean hotly debated over tepid coffee in graduate seminars, that moats around certain temples were also used to season food. How? Glad you asked. See, the moat wasn't stagnant, it flowed. Controlled by an elaborate series of gates and sluices, water could be diverted through specific temple channels, where it passed beneath or around various basins. These basins held herbs, spices, roots, and even dried fish skins, aromatic ingredients placed in porous containers or mesh reed baskets. The theory? As the water flowed through these aromatic circuits, it absorbed flavour infused with the memory of meals, the oils of offerings, and the spice of prayers. This wasn't holy water. This was soup base. Scholars still argue over whether this was intentional. Was it ritual? Was it a clever culinary hack? Or did the cooks just get bored one season and invent canal broth? But if you ask the locals, those who still whisper about what the jungle remembers, they'll tell you it wasn't flavouring. It was containment. The water was meant to carry away the spiritual pressure that built up in temple kitchens, the steam, the essence, the leftover energy of sacred meals. It needed somewhere to go. If it stayed, it curdled, became something else. So the water pulled it out, took the residual power of all those divine dinners and carried it downstream, out of the temples, back to the rivers, back to the gods. Maybe. You step down into the moat. The bottom is cracked mud now, dotted with weeds and bits of stone. You walk along its length, tracing the path the flavoured water once took. At one bend, there's a cluster of bricks where the canal system once opened, a sacred sluice. And near it, still half buried, is the curve of a jar. You kneel, brush the dirt aside. It's small, hand-thrown, a thumbprint near the rim, still stained a faint reddish colour, paprika or something like it. Maybe fermented annatto. You lift it, and the base falls away. Nothing left inside, but the shape is familiar. A flavour trap. These jars were placed under runoffs to catch spices that had dissolved into the water, then reused, recycled into new meals. A cosmic compost of sacred leftovers. The Khmer wasted nothing. Because waste wasn't just inefficient, it was dangerous. Every bit of flavour held energy. If you threw it away improperly, you weren't just littering, you were offending. Some priests even wore necklaces of old chili pods, dried to husks and strung together like warning beads. One inscription describes a ritual where used ginger had to be buried under moonlight so its spirit wouldn't cause mouth blisters in the next life. Again, might be metaphor. Might be why the local ginger is so spicy. Might be both. You leave the moat and step back onto solid stone. Above you, temple towers tilt at odd angles, as if leaning in to hear your thoughts. The jungle hums, low and steady. But under it, something flickers. Heat. Not fire. Not sun. Something subtler. A pocket of warmth wrapped in the wind. And you follow it. Of course you do. It leads you to a series of alcoves, half-walls, and collapsed archways arranged in a strange pattern. Not a corridor, not a courtyard, a kitchen maze, designed perhaps to confuse spirits, or maybe rodents, or maybe both. This was likely one of the main production kitchens for temple workers, not the priests, not the gods, just the staff. And yet it's as complex as any shrine. Stations for boiling, stations for chopping, grooves in the floor to let grease run off toward collection pits. One corner has a long flat slab slanted slightly forward, ending in a hole, a primitive oil extractor. Here, the animal fat and coconut cream were separated and stored in clay basins kept cool with shaded water channels. The ingenuity is absurd and infuriating. Because we talk about Angkor's engineering, its hydraulic wonders, It's celestial city planning, and we forget this. This is engineering too. An empire didn't just rise on bricks and beliefs. It rose on breakfasts. Rice scooped at dawn, soups boiled before sunrise, bread like cakes pressed into banana leaves with thumbprints of cooks you'll never know. This is where they worked. Sweated. Laughed probably. Cried. Definitely. One wall has real graffiti scratched in a lazy arc. A crude drawing of a lizard stealing a fish from a bowl. And below it, he returns every Tuesday. Whoever he was, it seems he had taste. You sit for a moment on a toppled stone. The heat has passed, but in your pocket you still carry that jar fragment, and it feels heavier than it should, because you're starting to realise something. Angkor didn't fall because it was weak. It didn't fall because it was defeated. It fell because its systems were so finely tuned, so ritualised, so precise, that when one part broke, the whole stew collapsed, the flavour turned, the rice soured, and no one knew how to start again. Some say the final exodus wasn't chaotic, it was quiet. The last priests bowed, the last fires were doused, the last meals left to steam alone on cold stones, and the shadows, they stayed, walking, cooking, waiting, not because they're trapped, but because they remember what it meant. You rise again, brush off your hands, and somewhere, faint and far, you hear it. A spoon against a pot. Not once, not twice. A rhythm, like a call. And you answer, not with words, but with footsteps. Because dinner isn't over yet. Not here, not in Angkor. You're walking again, because that's all there is to do now. Forward. Always forward like steam curling toward the ceiling. Like a ladle drawing slow circles in a pot that's been simmering since the beginning of belief. The jungle presses in again. The trees crowd the edges of what used to be streets, what used to be kitchens, what used to be someone's morning shift. But here, where the roots twist around temple walls like sleeping serpents, you see something that stops you mid-step. A griddle. Flat. Cracked. Charred. Stone. Not ceremonial, not symbolic, just practical, burnt into usefulness. It sits in the middle of a low platform surrounded by the skeletal remains of what must have been a canopy. The posts are gone, the roof has collapsed, but the scorch marks on the stone remain, black and resolute. This wasn't part of the sacred temple. This was street food, the forgotten kitchens. Because while the priests had their sacred broths and spice-coded prayers, and the kings had their astrologically aligned roast pig dinners, someone had to feed the other 99% of Angkor, the labourers, the masons, the boat pullers and fish descalers and water channel diggers. Someone had to flip the rice cakes. Someone had to stir the coconut porridge thick enough to hold a spoon straight. This was where they came, not for offerings, not for omens, for lunch. And the smell, it lingers, in the very bones of this stone, a kind of smoky sugar, possibly palm syrup fried in animal fat and poured over sticky rice, possibly just the dream of it. You kneel beside the griddle and run your fingers over its edge. There's a deep groove where countless spatulas must have scraped. One archaeologist argued this groove was made not from tools but from elbows, from tired cooks leaning in again and again for centuries. You believe it. Because this griddle is worn down not by war but by service. And here's the thing, nobody wrote about this place. The inscriptions sing praises to gods and kings and priests and elephants with excellent posture. No one carved a poem for the woman who fried rice flour cakes in the sun. No one sculpted a statue for the man who washed dishes until his hands cracked like dry earth. But they were here. Their shadows still flicker when the wind shifts. You move past the griddle and enter what was once a row of open-air stalls. The foundations remain low stone squares that might have held ovens, counters, or storage jars. This was a market in the oldest sense, not a place for coins, but a place for exchange. Trade wasn't always about gold. Sometimes it was, you help me lift this stone, I give you fish curry. Or, My daughter is sick, take these fermented plums and bring back ginger from the East Canal. You sit at one of the empty stalls. On the stone before you, someone etched a tally, a series of scratches, some crossed out, some circled. You can't read it, but you understand it. It's the universal language of keeping track when no one's watching. And beneath the scratchings, what looks like a name, or a joke, or a blessing. You say it aloud, just to see what happens. Nothing does, except the wind changes, again, and with it, another smell. This one sharper, vinegary, chili, fermented shrimp paste. You stand too quickly. The dizziness hits you like hunger after forgetting to eat all day. You follow the scent, because what else is there to do? And there it is. Not another kitchen, not exactly. A shrine. One of the smallest you've seen. Cracked open by time and tree roots, barely recognizable as sacred space. But someone recently has placed a bowl inside, still full. Of what? You can't tell. Some kind of preserved relish, reddish brown and clumped with herbs. It smells like thyme and vinegar and trust. You don't touch it. Obviously, you just stare. 'Cause here's the weird part. This shrine, it's not dedicated to a god. There's no image of Vishnu or Shiva or any celestial being. Just a stone carving of a woman, not a queen, not a priestess. Just a woman in a plain robe holding a ladle. One hand raised as if offering, or maybe warning, and on the wall beside her, a recipe. Actual measurements. Ingredients. Steps. It starts with, take 1 fist of ginger, crushed before sunrise. It ends with, leave covered until the ghosts forget your name. Now look, we're all skeptics in daylight, but here, under the cracked ceiling of a half-collapsed shrine, surrounded by jungle and lichen and the smell of something older than language, you believe it. Every word. Because this isn't a myth. This isn't a legend. This is someone's recipe. Not for immortality. Not for enlightenment. For flavour. The kind that matters when nothing else does. The kind that survives empires. You step back. You bow just slightly. And the ladle in the carving seems to nod back. Not thanks. Not welcome. Just. You understand now. You leave the shrine and continue walking. The air is heavier now. Not hot. Not cold. Just thick with something unsaid. You're getting close. To what you don't know. But the shadows are walking faster. And the kitchens? They're waking up again. You hear it now, far ahead. The scrape of clay on stone. The hiss of oil and laughter. Software. Muffled. Almost human. But not quite. The laughter fades as you get closer. Not suddenly, just softly, like someone closing a door, slowly, gently, on the sound. You stand still, 1 foot half raised mid-step, listening. But there's only the wind again, or maybe breath, the jungle's breath. You lower your foot, and you move on. The corridor you're walking through now is narrower, pressed close by stone on both sides. The walls are decorated crudely, yes, but insistently with more carvings of spoons, ladles, and what can only be described as aggressively enthusiastic chilies. You're in the part of the complex that was never meant for outsiders, not even for priests. This was behind the kitchens, beneath them, maybe even below the rituals. Storage? Maybe. But the walls suggest something deeper, something more private. You pass a small opening in the stone, no wider than your shoulders. You almost miss it. But the smell pulls you back. Not just spices, not just smoke. This is warmth. Still lingering, still recent. You duck in, step down. The air changes instantly cooler, heavier. You're underground. And what you see in front of you freezes your breath. A room, round, perfectly circular, carved entirely of stone. And in the centre, a single fire pit. Cold now, but unmistakable. Around it 4 benches, equidistant. This wasn't a kitchen. This was a council room, but not for kings, not for generals, for cooks. There's no doubt. The walls here are covered with inscriptions, recipes, ingredient lists, rituals, corrections. Someone even carved the words "Don't trust turmeric" on the third day near the ceiling. You circle slowly. Each wall panel tells a different story. One describes a dish made only during eclipses, involving a broth that must be stirred with the left hand while reciting the name of every rice goddess you know. Another explains how to dry jackfruit seeds using incense heat alone, which is absurdly specific and wildly unnecessary. A third warns simply, if it smells like teeth, stop. And below it all, at floor level, scratched over and over again like someone couldn't stop writing it. Stir clockwise, always clockwise. You sit on one of the stone benches. It's worn smooth by centuries of use. Your palm brushes the edge and catches on something. A small groove, shallow, repeated. This is where someone sat, hundreds of times, maybe thousands, thinking, planning, tasting, not for themselves, but for others, for the gods, for the empire, for the invisible machinery of a city that worshipped food as function. And this was the control room. Not for armies, but for ovens. You imagine the conversations that must have happened here. She says the duck is too dry. Well, the gods didn't send rain for 3 months. Try oiling it with coconut fat next time. Will that offend Vishnu? Not if you chant while doing it. Fine. But we're out of lemongrass again. I told you, get it from the Eastern Beret. It grows better there. That place is haunted. We're all haunted. Fair point. And maybe, just maybe, these 4 cooks, whoever they were, held more power than the generals, more sway than the priests, because if the food stopped, the city stopped. And one day, it did. But not without warning. In the final panel, near the doorway, someone carved a long vertical line of text. Formal, careful, it reads, "The fires grow thin, the water grows bitter, the rice no longer sings. Tomorrow we serve no more," and beneath it, 4 handprints, one for each bench, left there maybe, on the last night this room was used. You press your own hand next to them. The stone is cool, but not indifferent. You stand again. Walk slowly around the circle one last time, then climb back up, into the corridor, blinking as the light returns, and that's when you see it. A trail, not footprints, something subtler, spice, little flecks of chili, seeds, a sprig of lemongrass so dry it shatters at your breath. Someone or something has walked this path recently, seasoning as they went. The shadows are leaving a trail, and you, poor thing, are following it. Of course you are. The corridor widens into a long gallery. The columns here are tall, sun-bleached, lined with vines and memory. But between each one stands a statue, not of gods, not of kings, of cooks, each one carved with a different utensil, a whisk, a cleaver, a ladle the size of a paddle. One even holds a wok like a shield. This is no joke. This is a hall of honor, the forgotten pantheon. There's even an inscription at the entrance. It reads, "Let those who stirred the sky be remembered. For without the meal there is no prayer, and without the fire there is no God." You walk the gallery in silence. The air tastes like something's about to happen. And then, a breeze. Number not breeze. Smoke. Just a curl. From the far end of the gallery, behind a broken wall, a column of steam rises. Your heart stops. Because this time it's not memory. It's real. Someone is cooking, right now, and they're waiting for you. You don't run. You don't call out. You don't even blink too. Fast. Because deep down, under the logic, under the sleep-deprived skepticism, you understand. Whoever is cooking, they already know you're coming. The steam rises soft and tall, as if the air is holding its breath, reluctant to disturb the scent. You step slowly, softly, like you're trying not to wake the ruins. But the ruins are already awake. The corridor you're walking through now curves slightly. hiding the source of the steam like a secret too old to whisper outright. The carvings here are older, rougher, more worn long lines of abstract shapes that some say are early Khmer. Others say are just recipes written in panic. One spiral-shaped diagram ends with the word, taste or be forgotten. You believe it. You round the corner, and there it is. A kitchen. But not like before. Not like the dead ones. Not like the broken stoves and cracked pots and graffiti warnings. This one is lit. There's a fire. Small, low, but real. A quiet, obedient flame tucked beneath a soot-blackened wok. Steam curls up from the pan, disappearing into the slanted sunlight that pours through a hole in the stone ceiling above, and someone is standing over it. They don't turn. They don't speak. They just stir. You stop at the edge of the room, not sure if you're allowed to breathe. But the figure does not acknowledge you, at least. Not directly. They're wrapped in fabric that doesn't quite shimmer, but also doesn't sit still. Earth-coloured. Dust-coloured. The colour of old walls and memory. Their hands move slowly, methodically, with the grace of someone who has stirred the same dish for several hundred years. And the smell. It's unreal. Garlic, lime, fermented fish, chili, the sweetness of palm sugar just starting to caramelize, every note layered like a forgotten memory, stacked and humming. You could fall asleep just from breathing it in. This isn't hunger anymore, it's reverence. The figure finally speaks, not a whisper, not a shout. Just a plain voice, timeless and completely unimpressed. You're late. You open your mouth to answer, but nothing intelligent comes out. Just a small, undignified noise like a tired kettle. They don't look at you, just gesture toward the other side of the fire. A small bench, polished smooth by countless other visitors, or maybe just the ones who never left. You sit, obedient, as if this were your kitchen, your ritual, your afterlife. They stir once more, then set the spoon aside, an enormous carved ladle shaped like a crescent moon. You wonder if it's ever touched anything but sacred broth. Then they reach into a nearby basket, pull out a handful of herbs, tear them slowly, toss them in. The steam thickens, the air shifts, and now you see it. You're not alone. The room is full of shadows, not just one, dozens, not menacing, not ghostly, just working, chopping, grinding, pouring, measuring. None of them look at you, because you're not the first, and probably not the last. This is what the city became when the people left. This is what stayed. The kitchen kept going, long after the king stopped ruling, long after the priest stopped praying, long after the empire turned to dust. The shadows kept cooking, because someone had to remember. The figure at the fire speaks again, this time gently. You walk through the ruins, yes? You nod. You smell the recipes? Another nod. The rice that fed a million still remembers. So does the soup. They stir again. You came looking for history. You found dinner. The steam begins to rise higher, now curling toward the edges of your vision. Not smoke, not fog, not heat. Memory. Images flicker through it. A pre-shouting because the turmeric was 2 days too old. A cook pounding ginger until her hands blistered. A shadow offering a bowl to a god who never ate it. A laugh around a dying fire. A meal that ended too soon. A million spoons scraping empty bowls. A voice, your voice, asking for seconds. And the strange, soft sound of an empire falling. Like soup spilling over the edge of a bowl no one had time to catch. The figure lifts the pan now, pours its contents slowly, carefully into a stone bowl you hadn't noticed until now. The scent blooms outward, bigger than the room, thicker than the air. They look at you at last. Their eyes are not angry, not sad, just tired. You're not here to taste, they say. You nod. You understand. You're here to remember. Because this is the last kitchen. The last recipe. The last time someone stirred the sky and salted the shadows and cooked something just to keep the world from falling apart. And now they're handing it to you. The bowl, heavy, warm. You take it. You hold it. You don't sip. You just breathe it in. And in that breath you carry the entire city. You hold the bowl like it's made of sleep and prophecy. It warms your hands, but not in the way fire does. It's the warmth of old comfort, of kitchens you've never been in but somehow miss. It smells like everything that's ever made a place feel safe. And the figure just watches you, not impatiently, not expectantly, just watching. Like a recipe waiting to see if you remember the next step. You don't drink it. Of course not. This isn't a meal. It's a message. You look down into the bowl. The surface doesn't ripple, doesn't steam. It holds steady like it's waiting to reflect something. But not your face. Instead, you see scenes brief, sharp, as if projected from inside the broth itself. The rice fields of Angkor stretching toward the horizon in checkerboard green, glistening under the impossible light of twin rainbows. Farmers bent over in long, quiet rows, singing softly to the seedlings. A kitchen filled with teenage acolytes pounding spice with synchronized determination, sweat and laughter mixing in the air like coconut and chili. An old woman tasting a sauce, closing her eyes, nodding, not in approval, but in memory. She's tasted this before, in a dream, or maybe in a life that wasn't hers. A boy, barefoot, shirtless, grinning, stealing a mango slice from a temple platter and then hiding in a corner to eat it, his joy so pure that the gods apparently forgave him immediately. And then, nothing. The bowl goes still again. You look up. The figure by the fire nods slightly. They came to the temples, thinking the gods were up there, they say, pointing vaguely toward the towers above. They didn't understand. The gods were in the kitchens. You swallow. Not the broth, just the ache of it. The sadness of everything left behind in burnt pots and forgotten spices. You still don't believe me, do you? They ask. You don't answer. Not with words. Instead, you offer the bowl back. They don't take it. Instead, they turn away. Back to the fire. Back to the never-ending stew. The shadows resume their rhythm, clattering, stirring, grinding. And you carry the bowl with you as you rise and leave, because now you know, you're not just a visitor, you're a witness. You walk out into the temple ruins, bowl in hand. The air smells like rain again. Not that it's falling yet, but the sky is thinking about it. And the jungle is listening. You stop at the edge of a collapsed archway. Look back. The kitchen is gone, or maybe it never was, but the bowl is still warm, and you can still smell the lemongrass. You continue walking. Up a set of stairs cracked by time and stubborn tree roots, past doorways swallowed in moss, through courtyards where statues used to stand and now only shadows linger, and then you reach it, the highest point, the central tower, the symbolic summit of the temple, Mount Meru. The place where the heavens and the earth were meant to meet, the spot no one cooks in. But today, it's different, because someone has left something here. On the altar, stone dusty, half-cracked, leaning ever so slightly westward a tray, 5 small dishes. They shimmer faintly. You place your bowl beside them. It fits perfectly. Now there are 6, the old number. The original configuration of offerings in the earliest temple records, before the priest started editing the recipes, before the king started renaming the ingredients. 6 dishes, 1 for each direction, 1 for the centre. You step back, and something clicks, not a sound, not physical, just the world. Settling, like a pot lid finally closing. You sit, right there, on the stone floor, legs folded back straight, and you close your eyes, because that's the last part of the recipe. You don't eat it, you don't serve it, you become it. You carry the story, the memory, the flavour, The silence, the rhythm of kitchens that never asked for statues or scripture, just the chance to keep cooking. And as the first raindrop taps the stone beside you, you whisper, "Still warm." And somewhere, deep beneath the jungle, a mortar begins to pound again. The rain begins gently, like someone testing the temperature of a pot before adding the noodles. It dapples the stone around you in quiet, hesitant rhythm talk. Talk, talk, echoing through the temple corridors like footsteps you almost remember. You stay seated, still holding the warmth, still cradling the invisible flavour that hangs in the air long after the fire's gone out. The jungle exhales, and so do you. But the story's not done. Because even now, as the towers of Angkor rise above you like sleeping titans, the kitchen below you isn't the only one that mattered. No empire survives on one meal, one recipe, one shrine. This was an ecosystem of flame, and you're about to walk into another chamber of it. You stand, stretch slowly. Let the rain kiss your face once, twice, before ducking beneath an arch carved with a line of script so faint it looks more like a scar than a sentence. The gods grow tired of fasting. Fair enough. You descend a staircase slick with moss. At the bottom, the stone gives way to packed earth. The floor has collapsed in places, revealing the bones of another structure. A kitchen once buried by time and then unearthed by accident. It's here that archaeologists found the strangest artifacts. Not royal jewellery, not golden idols, spoons, hundreds of them. Some carved from wood, others from bone, bronze, coconut shell. Each one a little different. Some ornate, others primitive. But they were found together, carefully arranged in a crescent, facing the same direction, toward a hearth that no longer exists. The discovery baffled researchers. Was it ritual? Was it storage? Was it some forgotten religious rite? Or was it something simpler? A retirement, a resignation. You can almost hear it. We're done now. The gods have eaten. The city is quiet. Time to hang up the ladle. But here's the detail that keeps scholars up at night. None of the spoons were burned, not a single one. They were clean, polished, perfectly preserved, which means they weren't discarded. They were offered. And that, more than anything, suggests what the final act of Angkor's kitchens might have been. Not collapse, not failure. A meal. One last meal. You walk through the chamber, passing the recess where the spoon crescent was once displayed, before being removed and shipped to museums that label them as domestic implements, with no mention of the fire gods. In the far wall, you see something even stranger. A chimney. But it doesn't go up. It goes sideways. A horizontal smoke vent, carved directly into the stone leading deep into the earth. It's not an accident. It's engineered, purposeful, smoothed by centuries of hot air, oil, vapour and ghost spice. One theory fringe, yes, but persistent, says this vent connected multiple kitchens beneath the city, forming a network of scent tunnels, so that one temple could smell what the other was cooking. An olfactory alert system, a kind of sacred gossip. You smile, because that sounds exactly like something humans would invent. Practical, a little ridiculous, but beautiful in its own way. After all, what better way to know the city is still alive than to smell the neighbour's stew? You step into the tunnel. It's wide enough to walk through, just barely. Your shoulders graze the walls. The scent is faint, but undeniable. Smoke, garlic, rain-damp turmeric. You walk, one step, then another, and slowly the sound of rain above fades, replaced by something older, something rounder. Drums. Number not drums, pounding, the pestles again, back at work. You emerge into a circular chamber lit by faint cracks in the ceiling, where roots have punched through like fingers. Around you, 3 massive mortars sit half buried in the floor, their pestles upright, waiting. And around them, figures, not shadows this time, statues, stone cooks in frozen motion, one stirring, One pouring, one smiling, all positioned as if caught mid-shift. This was a memorial kitchen, built not to function, but to remember. The Khmer believed in ancestor worship, yes, but more than that, they believed in ritual memory, that places could carry knowledge the way skin carries scars. This kitchen was a monument, a recipe written in architecture, and here's the twist. There's a plaque, not stone, not metal, clay, pressed by hand, still slightly warped, faint fingerprints visible in the surface. You lean in to read, "To those who fed the gods when no one else remembered to eat, we keep the fire for you." And beneath that, no name, just a recipe. Rice, salt, water, 3 ingredients, no amounts, no instructions, because everyone already knows how. And if you don't, maybe you weren't supposed to cook here in the first place. You sit at the edge of one mortar, close your eyes, you listen. The pounding returns not from the statues, not from memory, but from somewhere further down. You follow the sound in your mind deeper and deeper, until the pestle rhythm becomes a heartbeat, and the heartbeat becomes thunder, and the thunder becomes rain again, but not falling now, boiling, in pots so large they could feed galaxies. And you wonder, was the universe cooked? Was it stirred into being? A great broth of stars and carbon and unspoken ingredients? Is entropy just the kitchen cooling down? You open your eyes, and all around you the steam has returned. The steam clings to your eyelashes now, soft and sticky, like a thought that won't let go. The chamber blurs around you, roots becoming ribbons, statues softening like overproof dough, and the walls breathing ever so slightly. You blink, and the steam parts. You're not where you were. You're somewhere older, not in time, because time has long since collapsed in these kitchens, but in memory. The stone beneath you is smooth, too smooth, like it's been walked by thousands of barefoot cooks carrying 2 heavy pots for 2 long hours. You can almost hear their muttering, not complaints, not quite prayers, just the noises of people who never stopped moving, and then light. Not sunlight, not firelight, torchlight. It flickers in the distance, and, beneath it, the unmistakable glow of fire pits. Dozens of them. Welcome to the Festival of 1,000 Fires. You've arrived in what used to be the most sacred event in the Angkor kitchen calendar. One night a year. The turning of a season. The return of the rain, or the receding of the flood, or the precise moment when Mars passed beneath a rice-coloured moon, depending on which century we're talking about. It wasn't just a festival, it was a test, a city-wide culinary challenge thrown at the gods. We are still here, it said, and we are still cooking. You step forward into a vast courtyard. Char marks streak the stone in long curving lines like calligraphy written in fire. These were once the outlines of open-air hearths, hastily built, then just as quickly torn down. Each family, each guild, each kitchen of the temple had its own fire. Some used wood, some used oil, some, according to one baffled historian, used fish scales compressed into combustible bricks. Why? Because the gods like innovation, obviously. You follow the layout. Here, a circle of stones where wild herbs were once crushed and fermented into something sour enough to make a king sneeze. There, a pit oven big enough to roast a boar, or a secret, or a whole generation of recipes passed down by burnt fingers and stubborn taste buds. And all around, shards, bowls, bones, spoons, thousands of them. Some archaeologists argue this wasn't a festival at all, that it was a disposal site, a mass dump of temple kitchen waste, a graveyard of flavour. But you've been walking long enough to know better. You see the patterns, the symmetry, the ceremony scorched into stone. This wasn't trash. It was memory in edible form. You reach what must have been the centre, a raised platform, round, a shallow depression at its heart. Here, the last soup was made, a recipe lost to time, yes, but not to scent. You kneel, press your face close to the stone, breathe in. You smell 5 things: sweetness, salinity, smoke, spice, and something you can't name, something round and deep and old. Some say the last soup was cooked when the Empire knew it was ending. A single meal, prepared with the last stores from every temple kitchen. Every jar of pickled starfruit, every sliver of dried fish, every teaspoon of chili paste fermented so long it had started remembering its own dreams. It wasn't meant to be served. It wasn't even meant to be eaten. It was meant to be heard. Because during the festival, when the fires roared and the mortars pounded and the rice boiled and the wok sang, there was a moment right at the centre where all the sounds aligned, drums of cooking, rhythms of belief, music made of hunger and history. They called it the resonant boil, and when it happened, the gods were said to lean down, just for a second, to listen. Not to prayers, not to songs, to simmering. You sit in silence now, trying to hear it, trying to imagine the 1,000 fires, the smoke like banners, the laughter rising over spice, the old cooks, their hands trembling from age but still faster than most, the young apprentices slicing too fast and nicking their fingers, trying not to let the blood land in the soup, and the gods, invisible, grumpy, demanding but listening, always listening. Because cooking was never one way, it was always a conversation, between you and the flame, between the recipe and the tongue, between the living and the gone, and now, between the stone and you. The wind shifts, the steam begins to fade, the fire pits return to shadow, but the scent remains. You rise. Because this wasn't just a festival, it was a promise, a declaration. Even if everything else fell, even if the city cracked and the rice spoiled and the gods stopped answering, we still cook, we still remember, and the flame still burns. You look behind you. The trail is gone. The ruins are quiet, but something deep in your chest feels warm. Not metaphorically. Warm. Because somewhere in this ancient oven of empire, something is still cooking. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for you to add the next ingredient. You walk on, heart simmering now, footsteps light as if the stone beneath you remembers how to carry pilgrims. The air has changed again. Not the scent this time. It's still thick with the long shadow of cloves, old fish and smoke, but the feeling of it. The jungle isn't pressing in anymore. It's waiting. Like a waiter standing beside your table, pen poised, expecting your order. You're in the final stretches of Angkor now, the outskirts of memory, where the temples began to crumble and the food began to fade. You descend a slope of cracked stairs, passing under a canopy of banyan limbs that have grown together like gossiping fingers. There are stones here, but they've stopped being buildings. They're bones now, vertebrae of a city's spine exposed by time and tropical rain. And you notice something new. No smells, not bad ones, not good ones. Just nothing. No herbs, no broth, no heat in the air. It's unsettling. Like when your nose stops working during a cold and the world goes dull. This was the edge, where the temples died, where the food stopped, where the taste was forgotten. You step into a courtyard, rectangular and empty. A pool once lay at its centre. Now it's a bed of cracked earth, veins of drought scarring its surface. This place was once full of flavour, and now it tastes like absence. This was not a kitchen. This was a dining hall, and more than that, a sanctuary of flavour. You can tell by the benches all facing inward, the long grooves in the stone where bowls were passed and set down and scraped clean again and again. But the people are gone. The gods are silent, and the smell, still not there. You realise with a sudden and surprising sense of panic that this might be what they feared most. Forgetting. Not death, not fire, not invasion or drought. but the possibility that one day someone would sit in this courtyard and not smell anything. It's hard to believe now, but there was a time when this space was full of clamour and chaos and chewing. A time when cooks argued about whose spice mix was better, when priests tried to eat faster than the gods could judge them, when soldiers licked their fingers and temple workers stole second helpings. One carving on the wall, nearly lost to moss, shows what appears to be a man dropping a dumpling and looking genuinely devastated. Next to him, a dog, wagging, waiting. There's humanity here, etched between the holy. A reminder that flavour isn't just function, it's feeling. That the meal was never about nutrition, it was about belonging. And when that ended, when the meal stopped, people didn't just leave the city, they left themselves. You kneel beside the dry pool, brush your hand across the earth, nothing. No seeds, no ashes, no smells. But you dig anyway, just a little. And there, beneath the first thin layer of dirt, you find it. A sliver, a shard, ceramic, from a bowl. You lift it gently, turn it in your hand, still stained, still faintly warm, not from the sun, from use. A historian might call it evidence, a remnant, a fragment of material culture, but you know better. It's a memory, one that didn't want to be found, but still waited. You stand. The courtyard is still silent, the air still tasteless, but now you hold something, and with it, the silence softens, as if the ground remembers your footsteps, as if the city in its crumbled edges and cracked corners is trying just barely to flavour the wind again. You keep walking. The path out of the courtyard winds uphill, narrow and uneven. On either side, half-walls rise like broken teeth. You step carefully, following a trail that doesn't quite exist. At the top of the ridge, you pause, and you look back. Angkor stretches behind you like a dried-out recipe, still legible, still beautiful, but missing one key ingredient. You. You were the missing piece, not because you're special, but because you came back, because you remembered, because you followed the smells, because you stirred the ashes, and somewhere behind you, in a kitchen you'll never find again, a pot begins to boil, just a little, just enough. The flavour is returning, not strong, not fast, but gently, like soup rewarming after a long cold night. You're not sure when the wind changed again. Only that, somewhere between the cracked bowl and the ridge, it picked up something different. Not just warmth, not just spice, movement. It feels like something has woken up behind you, but not chasing, not threatening, just rising. The kitchen isn't dead anymore, it's stretching. You descend the far side of the ridge slowly, the world soft around the edges like the first moments of a dream. The trees are taller here, older. Their roots have broken through temple floors and fused into arches that no longer need architecture. The stone is cracked, yes, but covered in soft moss that glows faintly green, like a memory trying to grow again. And you begin to hear it. Not pounding, not chanting, clinking. Spoons, dozens, maybe hundreds, not all at once, just occasional chimes in the wind, the sound of bronze tapping clay, of ladles brushing the sides of long-forgotten pots. You follow it, of course you do, because if you've learned anything, it's that in Angkor you don't find the kitchens, they find you. The path widens, and there, in the centre of a grove, surrounded by twisted trees and the remnants of stone columns, is a ring of raised platforms. Each one bears a shallow stone bowl, and each bowl is full. You stop. Something's different. The contents shimmer faintly, not like broth, not like oil, but like reflections. One bowl shows the image of a river long and silver, with boats dragging offerings across the water. Another shows a group of cooks laughing around a fire, slapping hands, trading chilies like playing cards. A third shows nothing but a single hand, trembling slightly, holding a spoon. This is not a place of food, It's a place of memory kitchens, where the taste doesn't go to the tongue, it goes straight to the past. And the past? It's awake now. Each bowl, a preserved bite of time, each one holding a dish that someone once made with so much care that even entropy couldn't erase it. You walk around the circle slowly. At the far end, one bowl is different, covered. A simple stone lid rests on top. No inscription, no decoration, just a question, waiting. You hesitate, but you've come too far to stop now. You lift the lid. Inside, nothing. But as the air escapes the bowl, it hits your face with the force of recognition. The smell is so sharp, so sudden, you nearly fall back. It's citrus, fish sauce, chili, but also sweat, steam, clay. It's everything you've walked through. It's the meal no one remembers eating, the one served on the last night, the final taste before forgetting. You inhale and it hits you. Not just in the nose, but in the spine. You see it again. Not visions now, memories. Your own? Maybe. Someone else's? Definitely. A young cook scraping burned rice from a pan and laughing anyway. A priest whispering an apology to a chicken before handing it to the butcher. A grandmother pressing herbs into a child's palm saying, "This one's for ghosts." A city-wide silence held in one last bite. And then darkness. Not bad, just quiet. The meal is over, but the taste lingers. You cover the bowl again, gently, and sit, because there's nothing else to do in a place like this but rest. You watch the steam rise from the other bowls, slow and pale and endless. The clinking has stopped, even the trees are holding still, and you begin to understand the truth behind it all. Angkor didn't collapse, it was preserved. Not in gold, not in stone, not in conquest or scripture, but in flavour, in kitchens built to mirror the stars, in recipes repeated until they became religion, in the simple, stubborn act of feeding someone even when the world is falling apart, and when the last fire burned out, the taste remained. It walked through time, it settled into stone, it curled into the wind, and tonight it found you. You, of all people, you who showed up late, you who doubted, you who nearly skipped this part, but you stayed, and now the taste is yours to carry, not to eat, to remember. You don't know how long you sit there, minutes, hours, centuries. Time softens in places like this. The edges blur. You're not asleep, but you're not quite awake either. You're steeping like a root left too long in the pot, slowly surrendering its sharpness. The stone beneath you hums faintly, like a bowl still remembering the meal it once held. Around you, the memory bowls continue to release their steam, slowly, reverently, like incense offered not to gods but to taste itself. And then, movement. Not dramatic, not sudden, just the quiet rustle of a footstep in the grass behind you. You don't startle, you don't turn, you just wait. The present steps forward, slow and unhurried. You feel it settle beside you, like a friend who is always going to arrive, just later. They sit. No words exchanged. Just two people, maybe two shadows watching bowls that still remember how to cook without fire. Eventually a voice, low, calm, a little dry, like it's been unused for a while. You came far. You nod. You saw the recipes. Another nod. And you understand now. A pause. Then a whisper. I think so. The figure exhales, the way someone does after a long good meal. You know, most people think we vanished, they say. But we didn't. We just ran out of flavour. You glance sideways. The figure isn't young or old, not male or female. Just there. Real in a way most things aren't anymore. They hold something in their lap. A spoon. Old, worn, familiar. You recognise it instantly. It's the same spoon carved into the temple walls, the same one etched onto shrine stones, the same one held by 100 statues. It's not ornate, it's not magical, it's just perfect, balanced, used, loved. Angkor didn't fall, they say again. It dried out. First the canals, then the kitchens, then the gods. You stay quiet. People think gods vanish when they're no longer worshipped. They continue stirring invisible soup. But they just get hungry. You swallow. The silence between you thickens, flavoured with memory and ginger. They forgot how to cook, you say at last. The figure smiles, not at you, just at the bowl in their mind. They forgot how to taste. You look around, at the steam, at the bowls, at the silence, and you realise these are not just memories, they're ingredients, left behind, waiting for the right hands. The figure stands, hands you the spoon, not with ceremony, just with trust. Take it, they say. You've earned it. You hold it in both hands. It's heavier than it looks. Warm, smelling faintly of lime leaves and firewood. And when your fingers close around it, something clicks inside you, like a flame catching, like a recipe remembered. The figure nods once, then turns, walks into the trees. No goodbye, no farewell. Because you'll see them again. You always do. You look down at the spoon, and something inside you whispers, start again. So you do. You stand. You find a small clearing. You gather wood. Not much, just enough. You build a fire, not because it's cold, but because it's time. And when it catches, when the flame flickers to life, you feel the kitchen stir beneath your feet. All of them. The temple hearths, the festival fires, the street food stalls and sacred soup circles. Every pot, every pan, every hand that ever fed another human in the city. They rise with you, one by one. Not ghosts, not spirits, just recipes with memories. You place a pot over the flame, add water, a pinch of salt, a sliver of ginger, a torn leaf of basil, wilted but still fragrant, and then you stir, clockwise, always clockwise. The steam curls upward, slow and delicate, and somewhere, far beyond the ruins, something ancient sighs in satisfaction. You taste nothing yet, but you feel the flavour coming, rising, returning, because the city never needed to be rebuilt. It only needed someone to cook again. The pot simmers gently now. You crouch beside it, spoon in hand, stirring slowly, not out of habit yet but reverence, because the act itself is a form of remembering, a silent circular prayer. Around you the jungle holds its breath, not watching, listening. The fire crackles quietly under the pot, the sound sharp against the hush. Your wrist moves without thinking, now fluid, sure, like you've done this before, in another life, or maybe in all of them. You add nothing, you measure nothing, because in this kitchen the ingredients are already here, in the air, in the stone, in the muscle memory of 1,000 vanished cooks. They don't need recipes anymore, they need rhythm. You pause, raise the spoon, taste. It's warm, salty, a little bitter, but true. The taste of endings, and of something beginning again. And in that moment, the jungle exhales. Birds you hadn't heard before begin to chirp, soft, uncertain, like they too are waking from a long slumber. A breeze stirs the leaves. Somewhere, water drips from a leaf into a puddle. The fire shifts beneath the pot, glowing a little brighter. The world, it seems, remembers what it is. You look up from your pot, and they're there again. Not just one, all of them. The shadows. The ones who stirred the stars, who cooked for kings and for ghosts, who never asked for temples of their own. They don't crowd you. They don't speak. They don't smile. But you know. They approve. You reach beside the pot and find a second bowl waiting. You didn't put it there, but it's real. You ladle a portion of the broth into it, set it on a flat stone and step back. A quiet offering. You don't know to whom. The gods? The cooks? The forgotten flavour itself? Does it matter? Somewhere deep in the canopy, a monkey shrieks. You chuckle. Don't worry, you murmur. There's enough for everyone. You sit down beside the pot, cross-legged, spoon resting across your knees. The fire crackles low. The shadows shimmer in the edges of your vision. The kitchen is quiet, not because it's empty, but because it's complete. This is how it ends, you realize. Not with a fall, but with a meal. A slow, warm, humble meal in the middle of the forest. A soup made of echoes. A broth that took 900 years to finish simmering. And you were just in time. You don't need to eat. You're full now, with steam, and memory, and something else you can't quite name. But it tastes like home. The shadows begin to fade like smoke after the flame dies down. Not disappearing, just drifting. You nod to them, they nod back. And the spoon in your lap, it's warm again. As if it too is saying goodbye. But only for now. You rise. The fire is almost out, the pot is empty, and the wind carries away the last trace of lemongrass. But the silence that returns isn't hollow. It's whole. You walk back through the ruins, through the vines, past the broken stone and the memory bowls and the pestles that still hum in the deepest chambers. The kitchens don't follow. They don't need to. They've done their job. They've fed the world again, and now it can rest. You reach the edge of the ruins where the jungle thins and the modern world begins to seep back in, quiet, cautious, like a diner arriving late. You turn, look back. The temple is gone, not vanished, just at peace. And in your pocket, you still carry the spoon, the stories, the smell. You walk away slowly. Not because you're reluctant to leave, but because you've learned how to walk like a cook, like someone who feeds things. And now it's your turn to pass it on, to stir the broth, to carry the flavour, to start again. And now, let it go. Let the last of the steam drift from your thoughts, like heat rising from an old kitchen roof after a long, full night. Let the silence settle, slow and easy, like broth thickening in a pot no one watches anymore. You've walked far, through heat and hush, through memory and moss and the scent of burnt garlic in places that don't even have names anymore. You've held the spoon, you've carried the warmth, and now you rest. Let the fires go out. Let the shadows finish their last meal in peace. Let the taste soften into sleep. You are no longer walking through temples. You're floating through echoes. The kitchens don't need you right now. They've simmered enough. And all the ghosts, they're full. You gave them that. So breathe. And let the scent fade. Let the ladle fall from your fingers, slow and silent. And let your eyes close finally, gently, like a pot lid sliding into place. Sleep now. Sleep and dream of broth.